Hello, welcome to part 3 of the Art Sucks saga. I'm kidding, by the way, but not with the part 3 thing, because for now we have pinpointed the problem, then analyzed the problem, and now it's time for the cure. And there's one word that either excites you as an artist or frightens you as an artist, and that is feedback. That little word is right in the middle of what a lot of artists are experiencing right now in the art community. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, then you're probably one of the lucky few that haven't had a run-in with somebody from the other side of the river, which is perfectly fine. However, I'm pretty sure this video will be of just as much value to you as those who have experienced the problem that I'm talking about. So let's just address the elephant in the room. We've all been there. We have posted something or showed it to someone in private, and we got a looks good, which feels nice, but doesn't really help. Or we got something like the anatomy is off, the composition is weak, and the colors just don't work. And suddenly you're left wondering if you should throw the whole piece into the nearest volcano. Truth is, both are feedback, and both are pretty bad, just in their own way. And feedback is one of the most powerful tools for improving as an artist. But most people aren't taught how to give it, and even fewer are taught how to receive it. And lucky for you, I am here to do exactly that. So let's jump into the topic. I'd like to discuss 3 different ways that artists can critique each other, when each approach works best, and how to actually use feedback without letting it destroy your entire motivation. But before I talk about the 3 different ways that I've prepared, I'd like to address the giving feedback part and how it is something that you actually need to learn. If you don't believe me, then just scour the internet for a bit and you'll find lots of courses that are, I don't know, 100 or even $200 each, maybe even 1,000, all because they include a feedback session with an artist. Usually it's a professional from the industry or a very good hobbyist from YouTube, some kind of creator or whatever. But it doesn't really matter who it is. What matters is that they have learned how to give feedback. Obviously, they had to learn how to receive it before, but that also makes them better at giving it. And even if it might not look like it, if you see me doodling my own stuff right here, you can rest assured I am actually a professional. And what I'm about to tell you is not just pulled out of anyone's ass. I'd like to start with the first way on how to criticize someone constructively. Let's call it the mirror method. Because a mirror doesn't tell you what's right or wrong, or what he likes and what he dislikes. It simply reflects what it sees. If you're using the mirror method, then you're describing your experience of the artwork. That will sound something like this. My eyes go straight to the face. This scene feels very tense and uncomfortable. I was confused about the character. Is he standing or is he floating? You notice what's happening? You're not making any judgments. You're just reporting what you're seeing. This is very valuable because as an artist, you often become blind to your own work. Let's be honest, after a drawing session of staring at the same face for 10 hours straight, you stop seeing it the way everyone else sees it. By the way, that's why a lot of artists flip their artwork around all the time. It gives you a fresh eye that can reveal things that you would have never noticed before. One of the best things that you can say during a critique is that here is what I noticed and not here's what's wrong. This kind of mirror method is especially useful during early stages of a project. You know, thumbnails, sketches, loose drawings. When the artist is trying to figure out whether their ideas are communicating actually what they try to communicate. It usually incorporates a lot of bigger changes, which is exactly why a lot of art teachers will give you this kind of feedback in the early sketching phase, rather than when you've rendered for 20 hours straight. But enough with the mirror, some people will just not respond to that kind of method, which is fine, there's a lot more. Let's call this one the W, because with this kind of method, you're asking all the W questions there are. It is also where critique becomes more practical. It's like when a teacher or a coach asks, "What are you trying to accomplish?" Because you can't evaluate success without knowing the goal. Imagine 2 artists create the exact same painting. The first one wants Renaissance realism. The second one wants modern anime. The feedback to both of them would be completely different. That's why good teachers start with questions. They'll ask you, what's your goal? What are you struggling with? What kind of feeling are you aiming for? Once you understand the intention that an artist has, you can help them move closer to it. All of that put in practice will sound something like this. You said that you want the character to look intimidating. Right now the pose feels very relaxed, so maybe exaggerating the stance could help. Or you could make a mind-blowing giga-brain move and ask these questions, be the W man, and then backtrack to the mirror method, giving your feedback the way I taught you earlier, like the mirror. You just reflect what you see without judging. Then it's suddenly not somebody misunderstanding your piece because they just looked at it the wrong way. It's someone that wanted to understand what your intentions were and then tells you, well, your intentions are this, but your piece does that. And believe it or not, if you're a good artist, then this is extremely valuable. Not only does it get the artist grounded on what he actually wants, it also gives him concrete feedback on what he needs to change. This kind of method is probably the best one when it comes to people that are not very good with feedback or are just not used to getting feedback. It's a good compromise between actually giving advice that helps and can definitely pull you in the right direction and still tending to the feelings that some artists might have a little too much of. And speaking of feelings getting hurt and all, let's talk about the third method, because that's where you actually hurt people's feelings. And with that said, this method is obviously best if your artist friend or whoever you're giving feedback to is already used to getting feedback constantly. Let's call it the challenger's approach. Similar to the one before, you ask a lot of questions, but not in the same way. Now you're not trying to understand what the artist wanted you to see. You ask questions challenging their piece. For example, something like, why did you choose this solution? Why do you use soft shadows for everything? Are you relying on more details rather than strong fundamentals? If you're giving feedback regularly to the same person, this might even include something like, you've used the same composition the last 3 times. Or why are you avoiding difficult poses or foreshortening? You're searching for things where you can challenge the artist on, either in the final piece or its process. It's a really good way to make people step out of their comfort zone. Usually it's not used if you're still on the fundamentals or just beginning to draw, especially since you're not used to getting feedback all the time anyway at that part of your journey. But if you're an amateur or even a pro, then this kind of critique is probably the best, because it doesn't point out what's just wrong or how the piece feels. It can challenge your entire process, and it can also be an eye-opener for the artist that maybe he needs to, retry the fundamentals or get better color accuracy. If you get feedback like this as an artist, it makes you question yourself, which in the later parts of your journey is a really good thing. And in the beginning parts is probably the number one reason that people are just stopping to draw. I wouldn't recommend using this third method for anyone that you kind of barely know, because you're basically dismantling the entire artistic process. And that's not very productive to some random guy on the internet. But if you're in a feedback group and you know each other pretty well, then this works probably best for both people. It's easy to do, low effort, and it helps a huge deal. And since I was just talking about, randoms on the internet not receiving critique well, especially with the method I just told you about, let's make a little detour from giving feedback to receiving feedback. Because there's a lot of people that react differently to all kinds of critiques, which is totally normal. Some people like this, some people like that. But the most important part is that if you receive feedback, you shouldn't treat every piece that you get as a command. It's not a law. If 10 people are confused by the same part of your artwork, that's probably worth paying attention to. But if one guy says that the boobs on your goth girl are too big, that's probably a personal problem. The second one is probably the hardest thing to do. You need to separate your art from yourself. I know that a lot of artists think like their art is their identity, their essence. It's how they pour their souls onto the canvas, either digital or traditional or whatever. But let's face reality, it's a picture. You might have worked hard on it, but it's still a picture. People are bound to receive it well, and people are bound to receive it not well. And if every critique feels like a critique of you as a person, then you'll either die a beginner or live long enough to see yourself become an amateur that's too defensive and not learning anything. And lastly, there's something that you can do, especially now that you've watched this entire video, which makes receiving feedback a lot easier. And it's not even hard. When you post something and somebody writes a comment critiquing your piece, then you just ask yourself, is this person being a mirror, a W man, or a challenger? Maybe he's a mix of all three. But by learning how to give feedback, you will learn how to receive feedback, and vice versa. You always have to keep in mind that not every comment is trying to do the same job. Now, let's conclude this little video. The best critiques are not about proving who's smarter. They are conversations. Sometimes you need a mirror to show you what others see. Sometimes you need the W man who helps to reach your goals. And sometimes you need a challenger to put you beyond what feels comfortable for you at the moment. If you can learn to recognize all of these three, maybe mixing them together as well, giving and receiving feedback becomes a lot less intimidating and a lot more useful. As I said in the beginning, there are a lot of people that pay good money for people that have actually learned how to give feedback. And by actually learning this yourself, you can even turn badly worded critiques into things that you can actually use, and won't need to pay $1,000 for some random internet guy to give you the exact same feedback that some other random internet guy would have done for free, just in a whole lot more words and a little more mean probably. Feedback doesn't need to be long, it just needs to be precise. If that kind of precision requires an entire Bible, then it is what it is. But usually a few words of advice are more helpful than 2 entire paragraphs pointing out everything that's wrong with a piece. And with that said, let me know what you think. Maybe you have other kinds of giving critique that I didn't cover here. Maybe you've recognized yourself in one of these 3 feedback givers, or maybe you've never given or received feedback at all. Let me know in the comments, and happy drawing.